Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Tracy, and I'm the education curator here at the Whale Museum. And the Whale Museum is in San Juan Island. That's kind of in the heart of the Salish Sea. And the Salish Sea includes all the bodies of water between Washington and British Columbia, Canada. And even though these bodies of water have their own names, like Puget Sound and Harrow Strait, the whole system was called the Salish Sea fairly recently in 2009. And that was because of the lack of boundaries that exist for animals that live in the Salish Sea. Borders exist for us. When we move across between the US and Canada, it's a big deal. But for animals like the killer whales that go between Canada and US waters, those borders don't exist. They're being impacted on issues on both sides. And so to kind of recognize that, that's why the entire system was called the Salish Sea. And the Salish part came from the coastal people who were native people who lived in the area for thousands of years. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the cetaceans here in the Salish Sea. And cetaceans includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And then I'll talk to you guys more about killer whales, our population, our local population of killer whales. And then I'll give you guys a little tour of the upstairs where most of our exhibits are at. And then you guys have some time to ask me some questions. So when I talk about cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises, and there's two types of whales. There are toothed whales. So killer whales include that, and hopefully you guys can see this. This is a killer whale tooth. These are really for kind of grasping, ripping, and swallowing, so they're not big chewers. But some whales, and oh, this is a sperm whale tooth. Kind of give you a difference. And that, I'll put this with the killer whale tooth so you guys can see the big difference in size. Not all whales have teeth though. Some have baleen, and this piece of baleen is from a gray whale. And it feels, I know we're doing this virtually, but if you were here and I could pass it around to you guys, it would feel like your fingernails or your hair. It's made out of the same stuff, keratin. So it wears down, grows back. We have several baleen whales that we see here. We have gray whales, humpback whales, and minke whales. And the way the baleen works in their mouths, so they'll have hundreds of those plates in their upper jaws. And they'll take in the water, and they're feeding on small food. They're feeding on like plankton, krill, small fish. So they take in the water, they take in the small food, they close their mouths, so they'll push back out all that seawater, but all that food gets caught in the hairs, and they have really long tongues to lick it up and bring it inside. Gray whale's tongue is over 2,000 pounds. So I'm not kidding when I say they're really long tongues. So, I mentioned whales that we see here, humpbacks, minkies, grays. Grays are, their baleen is pretty short. Like that was the real size, what you saw on that screen. It's not very big, but it can get up to 14 feet. And the reason why they have really small filters, so they're still filtering out their food, but they're kind of sifting through sand and muddy bottoms. So our toothed cetaceans, we have Dall's porpoise, harbor porpoise, and we also have, of course, our killer whales, which I'm going to talk to you guys more about. So we see several types of killer whales here. We see transients. Transients are the mammal-eating killer whales. We see residents, which are the fish-eating killer whales, and these ones are the ones we see the most often here. They have pretty picky diets. So like transient, they're going to be feeding on harbor seals, porpoise, whales. They're not going to switch their diet and decide to eat fish. Residents, they're just fish eaters. They're not going to change their diet and decide to eat a harbor seal one day. And the southern resident killer whales, which is our local population of killer whales, their 80% of their diet is Chinook or Kingston. So that's when I say they're pretty picky eaters. Toothed whales, including the killer whales, they're not really doing migration like baleen whales do, so they're not going to really special grounds during certain times of the year to feed or special grounds to mate. They can have calves any time of the year. And they're basically, we see them, our southern resident population of killer whales, from about May through September. And then the rest of the time, they're kind of ranging between California and Southeast Alaska. They're just kind of tracking the salmon. So they're going to be showing up at the major salmon producing rivers. The killer whale I see here is, and not very often, I think the last time it was seen was like 10 years ago, was offshores. So these guys are fish eaters, but they specialize in sharks. So worldwide, killer whales can be found, all the world's oceans. Population's about 50,000 to 90,000. Our population, so we have two types of resident killer whales. So there's the northern resident killer whales, and they're up by Vancouver Island in Canada. But the ones that are our local population are the southern resident population. And those are the ones going between California and Southeast Alaska. There's only 78 in that population. It is an endangered population, which means if we're not going to help them, the numbers are so low that we could lose that population forever. It could go extinct. Killer whales' life history is a lot like our own, actually. First 2 years, they're babies and they're going to be nursing, staying really close to mom. About 2 to 10, they start, they're juveniles, they're kids, they're going to start kind of exploring on their own. They're always going to stay in their family groups or pods. So they're tightly bonded, tightly knit family groups. And they're matrilineal, which means mom's in charge. So the oldest females are in charge, and she'll be swimming with her kids, and then they're swimming with their kids. So it's one big family group. And our southern residents have actually 3 family groups or pods, J, K, and L. They range in size from about 19 whales to 35 whales in each of those pods. So I mentioned that they're juveniles, so they're about 10. When they get into their teen years, the females can start having calves of her own, and she can have a calf, you know, basically anywhere from 3 to 7 years. And she'll keep having calves up until about the age of 40. And at that point, they pretty much become grandmoms. They help to take care of the babies that are born in their family groups. They're kind of the wisdom keepers. They have all that experience and knowledge of where's the best way to catch the fish and where to find the fish. So the family groups, the pod members really rely on them for that kind of experience and wisdom. Also, when they're teenagers, they're going to be going through growth spurts, just like human teenagers. And especially boys, we call them sprouters. Their dorsal fin go really large, really quickly, eat a lot of food, grow really fast. And once they've gone through their sprouting phase is when we can really start telling females from males. Female killer whales, their dorsal fin will get up to about 3 feet and be very curved. Males, it's going to be straight and tall. And when I'm talking about a dorsal fin, so here's my killer whale for you guys. This is the dorsal fin, the top fin. So females, it's going to be curved, about 3 feet. Males, it's going to be straight and tall, up to double that size, up to 6 feet in height. And killer whales are really long-lived. One whale that we know of who was the oldest, her name was Granny, and she was the head matriarch of J-Pod. She was also the head matriarch of all the southern resident population of killer whales. So we estimate her date of birth at 1911, which would have made her, she died last year, but that would have made her over 105 years old when she died. Yeah, pretty amazing. So we know they can at least live 80 years, if not 100 years old. One way we can tell, so what's really cool about killer whales, and we can do this with any cetaceans that have a dorsal fin, that top fin, we can tell individual whales. And when they get scars, they get scratches along their dorsal fin, they get cuts. So we can take photographs of that and match it back to the animal. But also, killer whales have this gray area. I'm going to turn this so you guys can see. It's called a saddle patch. So it turns out the left side and right side are different from each other. And so, and each saddle patch is pretty unique to each whale. So you could take photographs of the left and right side, and just like human fingerprints, you can match it to an individual animal. But what's also really cool about killer whales, not only can we tell individual whales apart, we can tell what pod they belong to just based on their sounds and vocalizations. So it turns out the southern resident killer whales, they're all speaking a common language. They can all understand each other. So it's like I'm speaking English to you guys now, you understand. But each pod has a distinct dialect or accent, certain calls that are only in their pods. So it's kind of like if I had someone from England in the audience, and we had someone from Boston and someone from Texas, we would be pronouncing words a little bit different with a different accent, but we could still understand each other. Like a trying to talk to a resident, it's like two different languages, like French and Spanish. They don't understand each other. So we can listen to their sounds, match them to individual pods. And as I mentioned, the killer whale population, it's not doing, our local southern resident population of killer whales is not doing so well. You know, we only have 78 whales. They were put on this population was put on the endangered species list in 2005. They haven't really recovered since then. And there's a couple issues impacting them. So one of these was a historical. So it happened in the past, still impacting them. So back in the 60s and 70s, a large number of whales were taken out of the population. And this population was not very large, probably 200 animals. So you can imagine how that really makes it hard for the population to recover when you take that many out. But currently, you know, salmon populations are not doing well. About 90% decline from what they were historically. So the whales, the killer whales, I told you how picky eaters they are. They're having a harder time finding the food that they need, finding that fish. And they can eat a lot of fish, 100 to 300 pounds of fish a day. Secondly, boat presence and noise, vessel presence. So noise can come from boat engines. You know, these whales are swimming through busy shipping lanes. They're swimming past urban cities. So lots of noise, a lot of boat traffic. But noise can also come from other sources, like underwater explosions from industries, noise from oil and gas exploration underwater, even sonar testing from the military. So killer whales use sound not only to communicate. So now with all that background noise, they gotta talk louder, they gotta raise the volume of their calls, and they gotta extend those calls to be heard. It's just like if you go to a busy restaurant and there's lots of people talking, you have to talk louder to be heard. But also, they use sounds to find their food. They do echolocation, which is they send out sound waves in the water, it bounces off an object and will come back to them. And they'll know, okay, I got a fish 200 feet away. So now with all that background noise, that's harder for them to do as well. And third, you know, pollutants and toxins. They have really high levels of pollutants and toxins in their body. And that's because they're a top predator and they're feeding high up in the food chain. And every time you go up a step in the food chain, you get more and more pollutants and toxins from the food you're eating. So by the time it gets to a killer whale, they have really high levels. And what happens is they store it in their fat, their blubber. But as they start to lose weight, because they're having a harder time finding food, those toxins and pollutants get in their body and it makes them sick and they die from being sick. But there's things we can do to help. We can all be orca stewards, orca superregulation here. And some of the things we can do are small things, the everyday things that we can, and it's kind of like a pebble in a pond. You know, it creates ripples. So the more of us that do these small things, the bigger and bigger impact it's going to have on helping the population. So stuff like using less water, taking shorter showers, not leaving the sink running when you're brushing your teeth, being careful what you pour down the drain, not pouring harmful chemicals down the drain that shouldn't be going down there, reducing, reusing, recycling, cutting down garbage and trash can also help. Also, choosing to eat fish from healthier fish populations. So there's a program through the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's called Seafood Watch. And they make little cards. You can also download an app on a phone, computer. So what it is if you like eating food and you go out to a restaurant, it will tell you certain guidelines. It'll say, like, these are the best fish to eat because these are from healthier populations. These are not so good choices. These are ones you might want to avoid. You can kind of do things like that. And, you know, talking about salmon, there are organizations working to recover the salmon. You know, they're helping with making sure they're not being overfished and also with restoring salmon habitat. You know, because salmon don't spend their whole lives out in the ocean. They spend their lives, early part of their lives, in rivers and streams, and they come back to them in the end of their lives. So when we develop along streams and rivers and dams up and things like that, it can impact the salmon populations. So there are organizations working to restore the salmon populations with boats, with noise and sound. So there's now laws that say boats have to stay at least 200 yards away from the killer whales in U.S. waters at all times, and they have to stay out of their direct path within 400 yards, with the idea being the less close they are to the whales, the less impact the noise is going to have on the whales. And then with pollutants and toxins, you know, I already talked about all the stuff that we can do to help them. Now, I understand you guys are adopted 2 whales. I think you guys adopted Mega and Yoda, I heard. So I thought I would end this by kind of telling you guys a little bit about them. So Mega, he's a big male. He was born in 1977. His mother was 40. 4 siblings. He had a brother, 2 sisters, one who we didn't know the gender of. And his fin is very tall. He has a big neck in the trailing edge, and a smaller neck, you know, a bit lower, and nicks are cuts. And his saddle patch, that gray area, is broad and shows a hint of a finger, which means a little black goes into the gray, which researchers call spray. He belongs to the L group, L pod, specifically the L12 subgroup. And they spend a lot of their time during the summer along the west side of San Juan Island. They have seen off the coast of Oregon and Washington in the winter, and as far south as short visits to Monterey Bay, California. And in the inland waters in Puget Sound and near the San Juan Islands. He's been an uncle for us. Yoda was named with the Star Wars theme. So her mother is Leia, and she's part of K-Pod. So there's 19 whales in K-Pod. She has 4 siblings. 2 were males, 2 we don't know. Her saddle patches are really solid. And her left saddle, remember I said the 2 sides are different? Her left saddle has a narrow finger, so a little bit of black going in. And her right patch has a bump on it. And in 2006, so she was born in 2003, so she's still a pretty young whale. In 2006, there were so many young whales that when they were seen traveling together, they were called the nursery group. And like most young orcas, you know, Yoda was often seen practicing her leaping and landing over and over again, and most often ending in a belly flop. And Yoda has a tall, narrow, curved dorsal fin, and she has a tiny scoop notch on the top of her leading edge. And Capon's often the last to arrive in June or July here. The latest, and Yoda and family have also been seen with Granny's group in J-Pod, and also with the rest of K-Pod during the later part of the season. All right, guys, so would you guys like to see a tour of the museum? All right. Okay. So hopefully you guys will be able to see this. So here, over here where I was sitting, this is our family groups of our 3 pods, our genealogy chart. So it has all the whale names, and the ones in pink are females, the ones in blue are males, and the ones in green we don't know whether they're boys or girls. Okay, let me pull the cord here so we can go around. All right. So in here, this room is kind of our kids' room. So we have games. There's a little movie video screen in here, coloring. Over here, we have a movie theater in the back, and it's showing a movie called Sonic Sea, which is all about how noise pollution in the oceans impacting whales. And we also have a collection of hunting and native cultural items in here, in this room. Hopefully you guys
I'm having a hard time hearing you. You are still being taped. She said that it was having some mistakes before. Remember when she said it was not catching all the way. She had told us that when she walks around, sometimes it doesn't follow her as well as it should. I was hoping she'd call us back. Huh?